Hey guys, welcome to Foxy Book Reviews. Today we have a little helper. This is Ray. She's my princess. She has to sit on my lap while I'm sitting in my chair at the computer desk, but she'll help me review this book today, even though she didn't read it because she's not cultured. She's just lazy. So today our book is The Seven and a Half Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is one of the most recent books that I've read, if not the first book that I've read start to finish in the last couple of years, which I'm not proud of, but life is busy. So I have read it before, and I didn't go back and reread it. I just kind of skimmed it to refresh my memories, although, to be fair, I didn't have to refresh my memories because it's just that good of a book. So before I go anywhere, read it. It is an excellent book, and I think you should read it. I don't care if you're not into murder mysteries, or if you're not into, sort of figuring it out, or whodunits. It's excellent, because believe me, I'm not really into those things either. I think they're fun. I used to read, the Encyclopedia Browns. I used to play all of the, and she's gone. I used to play the Nancy Drew mystery games. Not that I was very good at them. I'm not very good at deciphering clues and whatnot. But I did used to do all of that, like the Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. They had a mystery book line that I used to read too. But it's never really been my thing. I'm far more into the paranormal or fantasy and stuff like that. Dragons. I'm very into dragons. But there was something about this, and it was namely, as my review on the blog will talk about, it was namely because of the cover. Now, the cover, I think, is just so interesting because not many covers these days are just text. There's usually some sort of picture, and true, it has the little things over in the corners, but it's just a striking cover. It's just got such great imagery in the fact that it's minimalistic. The colors are really vibrant. Yes, there's black, but set with a gold and a bright bloody red. That's just really interesting. And so I was at Barnes & Noble, obviously, because I live there. And I had a gift card, so I was going in and I was going to just get, two books that would fit in the $25 categories, just two $12 paperback teen novels that I could read. When this was on one of those tables that they put in the center of the store, it's up and coming or new favorites or summer favorites, things that they do. And it caught my eye as I was walking by to go pay with these two books. And so I stopped and I backed up and I actually picked it up and I read the little blurb, and I'll read you that blurb now. But the blurb just says, "The rules of Blackheath. Evelyn Hardcastle will be murdered at 11 p.m. There are 8 days and 8 witnesses for you to inhabit. We will only let you escape once you tell us the name of the killer. Understood? Let's begin. Evelyn Hardcastle will die every day until Aidan Bishop can identify her killer and break the cycle. But every time the day begins again, Aidan wakes up in the body of a different guest, and some of his hosts are more helpful than others." So that's what it says on the inside. And it's not very long. Some blurbs I've seen have been on the inside slip and move on to the other slip in the back. And you can't give away too much, but I thought this one, it gave away just enough that I was curious about what was going on without actually telling me anything about the story. And side note, the only reason that we even know his name is Aidan Bishop is because that blurb tells us. He does find that out later, but when you start the book, you open up into him having no idea who he is or where he is. The first sentence, let me see. The first sentence of the book is literally, "I forget everything between footsteps." We're just as lost and confused as the character is. We don't know anything about the background. We don't know anything about the other characters. We don't know anything about why he's there or even who he is. We find everything out at the same pace that he does. So it's unreliable narrator to the extreme. This isn't just a narrator you can't trust. This is a narrator who doesn't even really trust himself. But it's just so fascinating to me that we have to go through this book not understanding what's going on. We pick up the clues at the same pace that he does. And so it's not it's not like a murder mystery where the person is an investigator or a detective or a cop or someone who's just really good at piecing clues together. This is a murder mystery in which even the main character doesn't know who he is, which is fascinating. And the fact that he inhabits different bodies every day, which is an intriguing method for storytelling, because you have that first character, and so Aiden, which we'll call him because it's just easier to differentiate from all the other characters. But Aiden, he wakes up in this first character, and then he has to go through the process of figuring out who this character is, what their background is, what they're doing, why he's here, where he is. Like, he doesn't have any of this. And then the next day, which is technically the same day, it's sort of Groundhog Day in that effect. It's 8 days, but it's the same day. The next time he wakes up, he's in a different body. And now, not only does he have to work out what was going on in the murder, but now he has to figure out who he is now, where he is. And it's really fascinating because he begins to piece things together in a way that makes sense, but also shouldn't make sense. Because true, the day is starting over again, but for instance, when he's with one character who can't move a lot, he has one of his, I don't want to say servant, but I guess it's a servant, like go out and do things for him and set up appointments, or during one point he leaves a note between the pages of a book, and because in previous days he found those things, in the later days he knows where to put them so that the previous days will find them, even though it's all the same day. So at any point, he's not just inhabiting one person, he's actually inhabiting all the people that are taking place, all the bodies that he'll inhabit. It's all happening at the same time, but he's only ever consciously in one. It's so fascinating the way you see the puzzle pieces start to like fit together and start to make sense as like a bigger picture, even though we're never really given details about who Aiden is or what he did. And so, kind of backing up to that, because I could ramble about this forever. I love this book. But like, the way that it's set up is Blackheath, which is where all of this is going on, kind of doesn't, you're not sure if it's real. The murder that he's being told he has to solve is of Evelyn Hardcastle, who is the heiress to the Blackheath Manor, even though she doesn't really seem all that interested in being an heiress. She lets us know that very early on in the book. She's gonna die at 11 p.m. every night. That's just, it's gonna happen. And the goal is for Aiden to figure out who kills her. Not to stop the murder, just to find out who kills her. But the way that it's set up and told by, we're given the rules through the Plague Doctor, who is this figure that's sort of death, maybe, or just an observer, some higher power, we don't know. The only reason he's called the Plague Doctor is because he has a Plague Doctor mask. That's all we're given. But he's the one who tells Aiden what the rules are. He tells Aiden that there's this girl named Anna that's also there, but we don't know who Anna is, and Aiden doesn't know who Anna is either. And then we're told that there's a footman who doesn't get a name and is just trying to stop from Aiden from figuring out who the murderer is. And then we're also told that there are other players in this game. Now, we're not told, I think we're told there's one. I don't quite remember that part. I think we're told there's another player, but we don't know if that other player is the footman, if that other player is Anna. Anna could be the other player, or Anna could be a completely different person. It's unclear if Anna and Aiden are supposed to be working together. And we're never quite sure if the footman is separate, if the footman is a different character in the game, or if it's just like another sort of Plague Doctor idea. It's just Turton puts together all of these pieces, but doesn't give us sufficient background on any of them. And you'd think that that would like make you frustrated, not having the solid details, but it doesn't, because it's fascinating. At each point, you're trying to figure out at the same time that Aiden is, who is who? Can you trust these people? For instance, the first day, he inhabits a person named Sebastian, and everyone is like, oh, we used to be friends, or I know you through this, or I know you through this, or this is what you're doing. They're telling him who he is, but he doesn't know if they're telling the truth, or if they're not, or if he actually does trust them, or if he's the bad guy. He has no idea. And with that, as the reader, you're stuck trying to figure out it at the same time. You don't know. Like, some of the characters do seem a little bit more off than the other ones. Some of them do seem a little bit more trustworthy. But is that because that's the order that they're presented, or is it because they really are untrustworthy or good characters, or there's just all these different factors because you are taking the part of 8 different people who are seeing these events in 8 different ways. There's never really like, it is all happening at the same time, but something that happens that seems, ambiguous or not really important at the beginning of the book, suddenly by the end of the book you're like, that makes a lot more sense now. But we don't know that until we get to that point. And so at each turn of the page while I was reading this, I like to fancy myself not amazing at figuring things out. I'm not that intelligent. But when watching movies, I can generally predict like how it's going to end or where we're going. With this book, you make a guess, and then two pages later, your guess is wrong. Like, flat out, your guess is wrong. Or you're second guessing yourself the way Aiden is. It's just fascinating being inside the character's head who has no idea what's going on because neither do you. And you're trying to figure it out while he's trying to figure it out. And you're both clueless, which is just amazing. So I just love this book so much. It was so fascinating. And it's definitely a book that, like, you need to set aside time to start to read. Like, this isn't a book where you can read a couple pages here and then come back to it because it requires constant focus. You need to be in the book. You need to be in the pages, in the characters. You can't really keep track of the clues. You kind of can if you're invested and you want to make a little side note of what's going on. Feel free. Like one of those logic puzzles. But there's no way for a person to accurately track through. At the end of the book, the one that I have, it has like questions with the author, and even he says that when he was trying to put the book together, he had to have like a bunch of post-it notes, and like I'm imagining that big detective board with the red lines in order to figure it out, because that's what you would need. And even then, I don't know if you'd get to it because, without giving anything away, I was completely blindsided by the end. Now, of course, there are probably people out there who might pick up on it. The clues and the subtle hints that lace through the book are just fascinating. When you read back a second time and you realize, like, all of these little things, they were there. They were there for you to pick up on, but you didn't. And I think that's what makes the essence of foreshadowing absolutely fantastic. Just having the clues there, but not making them obvious, and then, like, only realizing they were there when you go back and you read through. So, in order to, going back to this, Blackheath is sort of set outside of time. We're never quite sure. There's never really any indication of whether or not this is a real place, whether it's actually happened. At points, there are hints that it was a murder that had already happened in the past, and that Aiden is just trying to figure out who did it. There are points where none of the characters may even be real. It could just be like a purgatorial bubble set off to the side for people who can try to find redemption. Because the point is, the reason that Aiden is doing this is because he, in the real world, did something. We don't know. It's implied that it's a bad thing. It's vaguely implied that he did it with or to or for Anna. We're not sure. And in order to escape this sort of situation, he has to give the name of the murderer to the plague doctor. And it's only when he does that, then he'll be free. But we're not really ever given any clues as to what it was, whether or not this is a real place, a real murder, if it happened, if it's currently happening, if all of these people are dead, if the time of that Aiden's trying to return to is even the same time that Blackheath Manor is taking part in. And I think the deliberate exclusion of those facts is what gives some of the book its charm, because you're not being caught up in whether or not this is currently happening or not. Like, yes, I'm currently pointing that out because I have had time to think about it, but while you're reading it, you're not worried about the time or the era or the technology that's available. It's got a very Gatsby-esque feeling to it, Blackheath Manor does, but that all seems so irrelevant in the grand scheme of being Aiden and trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. It's really interesting to see or to experience, and I definitely think it's a book that you can't really tell people about. You have to experience, and here I am trying to tell you about it, but I just hope my excitement says more than my not very thought out review. I did write up a review on my blog, which will be linked below, but I can't really say that that's any more succinct or thought out than this is. It's just written in a way that you can go back and check. And it's not just the wild ramblings of a mad woman. But overall, definitely a book that I think everybody should read. Even if you don't think it's your style, give it a shot. I've been recommending it to everybody. It's by far one of my favorite books ever, probably. It's just fascinating, and going through it, like, some of the characters you don't want to trust, but you're not sure if you can or not. You second guess yourself at every turn. You want to trust them, you want to like them. I mean, even Evelyn Hardcastle, the person Aiden is trying to save, or trying to figure out who murdered her, even her, you're not really sure if she's a good person or not. You don't know if you can trust Anna. You don't know who the footman is. You don't even know who the plague doctor is. You don't know if who the other players are. It's just, there's so much confusion in this book, but it's so intentional and deliberate that, like, the only way you can be not confused is to get to the end of the book as fast as you can. And even then, you're still like, you have the answer, but do you? Do you have the answer? So it's just one of those things where I could talk about it for hours. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And just sort of to close off my rambling thoughts, but the very last sentence of the first chapter is, "I'm a man in purgatory, blind to the sins that chased me here." Like, that's just so, how could you not? Because Aiden knows that he doesn't know anything. He doesn't have any false pretenses. For an unreliable narrator, you can trust him in a strange way, because he says exactly what the reader is thinking. Like, I have no idea if I'm a good person or not. Should I trust this guy? I'm going to trust this guy. Wow, that was a dumb decision. Like, he's unreliable not because he himself is unreliable, but because the situations around him are unreliable. We are following a narrator who doesn't know who he is, but he tells you that. He's not trying to pretend. He never tries to make things not what they are, which I think is why it's such a good book to read. And it's so interesting that, like, Tartan and really did give personalities. Like, you have Aiden's personality, but he's not in Aiden. He's in other people, but they have their own personalities too, and you can tell the difference between Aiden and Sebastian, for instance. And even Anna and Evelyn Hardcastle and the various maids and servants that are around the place and the people that you don't inhabit, like, they all have such distinct personalities that it's just really hard to tell who's who and why you might be inclined to trust one person over another, if you can trust any of them, if they're even real. We don't know. And I think, and the thing is this is Stuart Tartan's debut novel. This is his first book. I'm fascinated to see what other things he might be able to pull off. Now, it's sadly, but also understandably, the only book for this. There isn't going to be, I'm assuming, another Evelyn Hardcastle novel, although I would read it equally. I just don't know if I think having that experience, once you have the experience of reading this book and you go back into it, like, you kind of know. I mean, obviously if you reread it, you know what to expect, but I feel like if you were to attempt something else like this, like, he has a very distinct writing style that I think if you were to read another book in the same vein as this that he had written, you would almost know what sort of thing would happen without knowing it. That doesn't mean it'd be bad, and I certainly hope he continues to write novels, because I would love to read the next things that he writes. And this one was published. When was this published? This was published in 2018, so 2-ish years ago. It's almost 2021, but oh, that's scary. But so this was published about 2 years ago, and he says at the end, the author questions that I have at the back, that it took him several years to write this, which is understandable. The amount of thought and planning and all of that would have to go into keeping track of everything that he's writing is just absurd. God knows I couldn't do that. So this has been my rambling. I don't know if you got anything out of that, but The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, even the title, it's just so good. Excellent book. Definitely recommend. I think you should read it. There's nothing really in it that would be off-putting. There's a murder, there's some violent scenes, but there's no, like, it's not heavily graphic. There's no, like, sex scenes. There's some swearing, I think, but most of it is just tension, stress and tension of not knowing what's going on. So it's definitely something you can read. Not something you should consider a light read, something you would want to sit down and, like, really put your mind into and get through. But honestly, if this were made into a movie, I would be, like, first in line to watch it. It's just so good. I don't know if a movie could do it justice, but just read it. Read it and take my word for it, okay? So, for our first review, that was wildly chaotic, but I think that's understandable, and, you know, even kind of makes sense for the quality and type of book that this is. Just wildly chaotic. Excellently written, but wildly chaotic. So, that was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. The full review is down on my blog, which is linked below. If you enjoyed this review, despite my rambling and incoherent babbling at times, give a like, give a follow, give a subscribe, check out my Instagram where I post stuff for the reviews, and my Facebook page and the blog, and just give a follow. Keep up. I will have more reviews in the near future. Like I said in my introduction video, which I posted like literally 10 minutes ago, my next book that I'll be looking at is The Scorpio Races, which again I have read, but I'm rereading this one in full because it's been longer. I haven't read that one in quite some time, and I need to refresh. But if you have any suggestions, if you have any thoughts, if you've read it, not The Scorpio Races, if you've read The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and you have thoughts, feel free to comment and we can discuss, perhaps. If you haven't read it, go read it. It's fantastic. But that is all for now. This has been Foxy Book Reviews. I'm your resident reader and reviewer, and I will see you in the next review.